These is the story of a young, beautiful girl who got raped by her uncle. The village of Ogba was alive with sunrises that painted the earth gold, and evenings that whispered with the voices of birds and distant drums. In that small, dust-blown village in Edo State, where children ran barefoot and mothers hummed tunes by the fire, lived a girl named Amara. Her name meant grace, and perhaps that was a prophecy. But if it was, it wouldn't show for many years. Amara was 13 and full of life. Her laughter could warm even the hardest of hearts, and her smile seemed to hold the whole world inside it. She was the kind of child elders blessed when they passed by. "This one will go far," they would say. She had dreams, simple ones: to finish school, to become a teacher, to build a house for her mother, and to never lack food on the table. Her family was not wealthy, but they had peace. Her mother, Mama Ngozi, was a single parent who worked tirelessly selling vegetables at the local market. Her father had died when Amara was just 4. Since then, life had been a mixture of hardship and quiet survival. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Then came Uncle Ikenna. Ansi, he was her mother's younger brother. He arrived from the city with suitcases full of clothes and a tongue smooth as butter. "I've come to help," he said, "to lift this family from poverty." Mama Ngozi, overworked and desperate for any form of relief, welcomed him with open arms. At first, it felt like a blessing. He brought snacks for the children, helped pay for school fees, and occasionally gave Amara money to buy Puff Puff after school. He was charming, confident, and everyone in the compound respected him. But behind the kind smile was something twisted, something dark. It started with long stares, then lingering touches, then soft whispers in Amara's ear when no one else was watching. Amara didn't know how to respond. She was a child. One evening, her mother had gone to a vigil at the church. Uncle Ikenna returned early from town and found Amara washing plates in the backyard. He came close, smiled, and asked her to help him search for something inside the room. Innocent, unaware, she followed him inside. That night, the sky broke. He locked the door. His eyes weren't friendly. His voice wasn't soft. When she tried to scream, he covered her mouth. When she cried, he whispered, "If you tell anyone, I'll kill you. You hear me?" When he was done, he left her bleeding and broken on the floor. The girl who walked out of that room was not the same who had gone in. For days, she said nothing. She washed her blood-stained underwear behind the bathroom. She avoided his eyes. She jumped every time a man walked near. She wanted to disappear. But the pain wouldn't stop. The nightmares wouldn't stop. So one day, she gathered courage, trembling like a leaf, and told her mother, "Mama, Uncle, he did something to me." Her mother blinked. "What did he do?" "He touched me. He forced me. Mama, I didn't want—" Before she could finish, a slap thundered across her face. She stumbled back in shock. "You wicked girl! You want to destroy my brother's name? Eh? What kind of spirit is this? You want to disgrace this family?" Amara wept. She begged. But Mama Ngozi would not hear her. "Keep your mouth shut," she said. "Let this be the last time you speak such evil." The next morning, Uncle Ikenna smiled at her across the table as if nothing had happened. That was the last straw. That night, Amara took the little money she had been saving, tied her clothes into a plastic bag, and ran. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't care. Anywhere was better than this. Benin City greeted her with honking buses, polluted air, and strangers who didn't look twice. She spent the first night in a motor park curled beside a concrete bench. Her stomach growled, her body ached. She had no one to call, no one to trust. Within a week, she was begging for food, scavenging leftovers, and sleeping in markets. One day, a woman named Madame Stella approached her. She looked elegant, smelled of perfume, and said all the right things. "Sweetheart, are you hungry?" Amara nodded. Come with me, I'll take care of you. You'll never sleep on the street again. For the first time in weeks, someone showed her kindness. She followed. Madame Stella's house wasn't a home. It was a brothel. At first, Amara was told to clean, wash clothes, run errands. But soon, the truth became clear. Every night, young girls dressed in short skirts painted their faces and left the house with men who came in expensive cars. Amara tried to leave, but the gate was always locked. And one night, a client came and said, "I want the new girl." That was the beginning of another kind of hell. At just 14, she became Trish, a made-up name for a made-up version of herself. She began to drink, smoke, take pills that made her float, pills that made the pain feel far away. She numbed herself because the real Amara couldn't survive this. She tried to run away once. They caught her, beat her, locked her in a room for 2 days. After that, she stopped trying. One day, she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. Her eyes were lifeless. Her smile was fake. She felt like a walking corpse. But still, something inside her whispered, "This is not the end. This is not all there is." Amara was now 17. She had been in the system for nearly 3 years. The city knew her. The streets had swallowed her. She had seen girls overdose in bathrooms. She had watched fights break out over clients. She had stared into the eyes of powerful men, married men, pastors, politicians, and watched them destroy their vows in the darkness. But it was the fake pastors that confused her the most. They came in wearing white garments, anointed oil in their pockets, and lust in their eyes. One of them, Pastor Kelvin, came every Sunday evening after service. He would preach at his church in the morning and lie with her at night. "You need deliverance," he would say afterward, handing her a dirty envelope. "But God is using you to humble me." She wanted to believe in God. She really did. But every time someone mentioned his name, she felt sick. One day, she collapsed. Too many pills, too much alcohol, too many nights without sleep. She woke up in a government hospital, the ceiling spinning above her. A social worker had brought her in. Her name was Sister Ruth. She wasn't rich or loud. She didn't promise heaven. But she sat by Amara's bed for 3 days, reading scriptures and holding her hand. "You're not too far gone," she said. "God hasn't forgotten you." Amara wanted to believe her. When she was discharged, Sister Ruth begged her to come stay at a Christian home for girls. Amara agreed, but only for a week. She didn't trust churches. She didn't trust anyone. That's where she met Pastor Dami. The first time Amara saw Pastor Dami, he didn't look like the men she had known before. He didn't wear expensive shoes or drive a flashy car. He wasn't shouting and sweating on a pulpit surrounded by bodyguards. He walked into the girls' home quietly, carrying a small black Bible and a plastic bag filled with fruits and bottled water. He didn't speak in tongues or promise heaven. He sat among the girls, asked for their names, and listened, really listened. When it was Amara's turn to speak, she hesitated. "My name is Trish," she said, out of habit. Pastor Dami smiled gently. "That's the name they gave you?" She nodded. "What's your real name?" She paused. No one had asked that in years. Not really. Her heart beat fast. "Amara." "Grace," he whispered as if tasting the word. "A beautiful name. And very prophetic." That moment touched something deep inside her. For the first time, someone had looked past the makeup, the brokenness, the scars, and saw her, the real her. Over the next few weeks, Pastor Dami visited regularly. He taught simple Bible lessons, not about fire and brimstone, but about healing, about love, about restoration. One day, he said something that made her freeze. "God is not mad at you, Amara. He's madly in love with you." She laughed bitterly. "Me? After everything I've done, the things I've seen, I'm dirty, Pastor. You don't know the half of it." He didn't flinch. He leaned in closer and said, "You were never created for the dirt. You were created for light, and no matter how deep the darkness, the light still shines brighter." That night, Amara couldn't sleep. Those words echoed in her soul. She began attending counseling sessions with Sister Ruth. At first, she was quiet. Then slowly, the layers started peeling away. She talked about Uncle Ikenna, about Mama Ngosi's rejection, about the nights with clients, the abortions, the drugs, the demons that haunted her in her sleep. And through it all, Pastor Dami remained, not to fix her, not to preach at her, but to walk with her. One evening, while watching the sunset from the porch, Amara broke down. "I want to be free," she whispered. "I want to be whole. I want to start again." That night, she gave her life to Christ, not in a dramatic altar call, but in quiet tears and trembling words. Pastor Dami led her in prayer. When she finished, she felt a weight lift off her chest. It wasn't all gone. The scars remained. But for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. Real hope. Over the next year, Amara transformed. It wasn't easy. Healing never is. She had relapses, panic attacks, days when shame crept back in like an old friend. But she fought. She learned to write again, to speak at small women's groups, to share her testimony. Her voice, once silent and abused, became a powerful tool of freedom. One day, she told her story at a youth program hosted by Pastor Dami's church. Her hands shook as she took the microphone. But as she spoke about pain, survival, and God's grace, the crowd sat in stunned silence. By the time she finished, there were tears in many eyes. Afterward, people lined up to hug her, to thank her, to tell her, "Your story gave me courage." Amara had become a lighthouse. Months later, something unexpected happened. Pastor Dami asked to see her privately. She thought it was for another program, but when she arrived, he sat nervously, hands folded. "I didn't want to say this before," he began. "I needed to be sure you were strong enough, that you knew your worth apart from anyone else's approval. But now I can't keep it to myself anymore." She looked at him confused. "I've watched you grow from ashes to beauty. I've watched you fight, fall, and rise again. Amara, I love you, not because of your past, but because of the woman you are now." She froze. Tears welled up in her eyes. "But after everything?" "Because of everything," he said. "Because you're a testimony of what God can do." A year later, they got married in a simple but beautiful ceremony. The girl who once walked the streets now walked down the aisle in a white gown, holding hands with the man who never judged her. They started a ministry together for abused and exploited girls. A safe haven, a shelter, a new beginning. And whenever Amara spoke to the girls, she would end with the same words. "If God can rewrite my story, He can rewrite yours too. There is still hope. Always." The sun beat gently on the tiled roof of the modest building that sat on the outskirts of Benin City. It was nothing fancy, just 3 wings of painted concrete rooms, a small hall, and a courtyard filled with flowering shrubs and the sound of young laughter. But to the girls who found their way through the rusted gate and into the open arms of Amara and Pastor Dami, it was more than a building. Nazit. It was a lifeline. They called it the Lighthouse. It had taken nearly 2 years to establish. The beginning was humble. Amara and Dami using their living room to counsel a few girls rescued from the streets and brothels. With the help of some donors and supporters, many who were touched by Amara's testimony, they purchased a piece of land and began to build. Amara poured herself into the project. Every corner of the center bore a reflection of her journey. The walls were painted in warm, calming colors. The dorms had soft beds and reading lamps. The courtyard had a mural of butterflies and broken chains. and on the largest wall of the hall was a hand-painted phrase, "Beauty for ashes." Each morning began with devotion, not forced religion, but healing words, gentle music, open prayers, and personal sharing. Many of the girls had no idea who God was, or had known him only as a distant figure who allowed pain. But through Amara's stories, raw and unfiltered, they began to believe again. There was Ada, rescued from a trafficking ring in Lagos. She had been injected with drugs to keep her obedient. Her body bore scars, and her eyes were empty. But in the lighthouse, she rediscovered her worth. She learned to sing again. There was Chinwe, who ran away from home after being molested by her father. She had lived on the streets, stealing and sleeping in markets. When she first came, she didn't speak. But slowly, through Amara's mentorship and counseling, her voice returned. She began drawing again, capturing dreams in charcoal sketches. Then there was Ifeoma, who was 8 months pregnant and had tried to abort the child with herbal mixtures. When she met Amara, she had given up completely. But with care, encouragement, and support, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Dami. Every girl that passed through the lighthouse became a chapter in a growing book of redemption. Amara's schedule was intense. Counseling sessions, outreach to brothels, court hearings for underage victims, media interviews. She was invited to churches, schools, and conferences to share her testimony. Her voice echoed across radio waves, on podcasts, and through tear-filled auditoriums. But she remained grounded. At night, after all was quiet, she would sit in the prayer garden behind the center. There she would talk to God, often with tears in her eyes. Not tears of pain, but gratitude. "Thank you," she would whisper, "for choosing me, for using my mess for your message." She never forgot where she came from. One day, a young girl was brought to the center by police. Her name was Mimi. She was 14, addicted to tramadol and traumatized by multiple rapes. She fought everyone, screaming obscenities, refusing food, banging her head on the walls. Amara knew that look in her eyes, the rage, the fear disguised as anger. She took Mimi into her room and sat quietly, waiting. After an hour of silence, she began to speak. She told her own story, not the polished version, but the gritty truth. The nights she bled alone, the screams that no one heard, the drugs, the men, the suicidal thoughts. Mimi stared at her. "You?" she whispered. "Yes, me." A long pause. Then Mimi broke down and sobbed. That was the beginning of her healing. As years passed, the lighthouse expanded. They opened another branch in Port Harcourt, then Abuja, then a mobile clinic for rural villages. Girls who had once been victims became volunteers. Some became social workers, counselors, even police officers. Amara became a national voice. She sat on panels, advised the Ministry of Women Affairs, and was invited to speak at the United Nations Conference on Human Trafficking in Geneva. But still, every Sunday, she stood on the small stage of her church and sang softly during worship. Her favorite song? "You Saw the Best in Me." Her love for Dami grew deeper with time. They were not perfect. They argued, faced pressure, grieved losses, but through it all, they held hands. "I married a warrior," Dami would say. "And I married a healer," Amara would reply. Together, they became a force, healing, restoring, building. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Amara stood before a packed crowd in a hall decorated with photos of rescued girls and handwritten thank you notes. She took the mic, her eyes misty. "I was once broken, used, thrown away, but God picked me up, cleaned me, and gave me purpose. Not because I was good, but because He is good." The crowd erupted in applause. "And I want every girl listening to know this. No matter what you've been through, there is still hope. The hall fell silent. She continued, her voice trembling. If you're out there and you feel unworthy, if shame wraps around you like chains, if you think your story is over, I want you to hear me clearly. It's not. You are not your trauma. You are not your past. You are not what they did to you. You are a masterpiece in the making. Amara paused, smiled, and ended with the words that had become her life's mission. Beauty can rise from ashes. Light still overcomes darkness. And grace still saves. The lighthouse had become more than a shelter. It had become a movement. By the 15th year of its existence, the impact of Amara's ministry had rippled across Nigeria and beyond. The stories of transformation birthed within its walls had become too numerous to count. Documentaries were made, books were written, lives were changed. But Amara remained focused on one thing: the girls. She still walked the halls every morning, greeting the residents with hugs and prayer. She sat with them in small circles, not as a celebrity or founder, but as a sister, a fellow survivor. Her humility became her most powerful tool. She had begun a mentorship program, one that trained survivors who had healed to become advocates and leaders. They were taught how to speak, how to counsel, how to mediate with the police, how to engage with difficult cases, and, most importantly, how to love without judgment. One of her mentees, Joy, who had once tried to poison herself after escaping a cult ring, now led the Lighthouse branch in Port Harcourt. Joy would often tell new girls, "If Amara could rise, so can you. If I could rise, so can you." Amara also developed a curriculum called Daughters of Grace, a year-long journey of spiritual, emotional, and mental healing. It included classes on forgiveness, purpose discovery, career training, and faith restoration. Thousands went through the program. Then came the testimonies. One woman became a lawyer and began prosecuting traffickers. Another, once sold by her mother at age 9, now ran a safe house in Ghana. And a young girl who had been rescued after being found unconscious in a drug den later became a nurse and returned to the lighthouse as a volunteer. Amara would often sit in quiet awe, whispering, "Lord, look what you've done." In her personal life, things were changing too. Her 2 daughters, Grace and Eliana, were growing fast. Grace was named after the message that saved her mother. Eliana, which meant God has answered, came after a long season of praying through miscarriages. Amara and Dami remained deeply in love. Their evenings were often filled with laughter, storytelling, and watching old Nollywood films. Yet they also wept with families who lost daughters, stood by girls who relapsed, and prayed for miracles daily. One day, a girl named Ruqayyat came into the lighthouse. A Muslim by birth, she had escaped an arranged marriage and had been brutalized by men who promised her shelter. She was angry at all religion, especially Christianity. But Amara didn't try to convert her. She simply loved her, gave her a room, a warm bath, a new set of clothes, then listened as she cried. Weeks later, Ruqayyat asked to speak during devotion. "I came here hating all of you," she said with trembling hands. "But the love I've received here has changed me. You did not preach at me. You just loved me. I want to know this Jesus." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Amara often reflected on how love had saved her. Real love, not religion. And that's what she offered: compassion without condition. Then came the invitation that shook her world. A global anti-trafficking summit in New York requested her as a keynote speaker. She had spoken in many countries, but this was different. Here she would address world leaders, policymakers, and media giants. At first she was nervous. "I don't speak like them. I don't have degrees." But Dami held her hands and said, "You have scars, Scars that speak louder than certificates. She traveled with a team of 5, including Joy and 2 rescued girls who were now university students. On the night of her speech, the auditorium was filled with diplomats, social workers, and representatives from 40 nations. When she took the stage, she didn't use a teleprompter. She spoke from the heart. "I was raped at 12 by someone I called family," she began. "I became addicted, violent, and hopeless. I lived in darkness. But then someone saw me, not as trash, but as treasure." She told of Pastor Dami, the lighthouse, the girls, the miracles. "But the most powerful miracle," she said, "is not that we were rescued. It's that we became rescuers." Thunderous applause filled the room. After her speech, a young woman from Thailand approached her with tears. "I was trafficked too," she whispered. "Your story gives me strength. Thank you." Later that night, Amara knelt in her hotel room, overwhelmed. "God," she prayed, "I didn't deserve this, but you gave me a second chance. Please use me more." The following year, Amara launched the Legacy of Light Foundation, focused on training women globally to create healing homes like the Lighthouse. She traveled from village towns in Kenya to refugee camps in Syria. Wherever there was darkness, she brought light. As her 60th birthday approached, a grand celebration was planned. But she insisted, no gifts, only testimonies. And so they came. Girls now women, broken now whole, survivors now leaders. They filled the hall, some flying in from around the world. As each one stood to speak, the legacy of Amara unfolded, living proof that pain can birth purpose. Toward the end, Grace, now 23 and running a lighthouse initiative in South Africa, took the stage. "My mother," she said with tears, "is more than a survivor. She is a light, and we, her daughters, will keep that light burning." Amara sat quietly, her heart full. As the sun set that evening, she stood outside the original lighthouse building. She looked at the wall where Beauty for Ashes was still painted. A little girl ran up and hugged her. "Mama Amara," she squealed. Amara bent down, kissed her forehead, and whispered the words she had once needed to hear. "You're not broken. You're becoming." To every girl, every woman, every soul who's ever felt ruined, lost, or abandoned, you are not alone. Your pain does not define you. There is healing, there is restoration, and there is hope. Don't give up. There is still light, and it can shine through you. With love, Amara.